We're going to talk about this with CBSN political contributor Leslie Sanchez and roll call columnist Jon Allen. He's joining us remotely because there's a lot to get through here, guys. First off, Leslie, let me start with you. What's your takeaway from what you just heard?
I think the big takeaway, and I think what people are going to hear, is that Donald Trump wants to ensure that the American eagle does not become a sitting duck, that America can remain strong. I think it was an extraordinary contrast with Barack Obama. That's where he wanted to be, right? And it really speaks to, I hate to use this term so early in the campaign, but red meat that Republican base really fundamentally believes. They believe that the American country has, like he talked about in position number one, has depleted a lot of its resources, that it's overextended itself, not only from a military standpoint, but from a financial standpoint in ensuring the national security interest around the world. And I also felt it was compelling when he's talking about the humiliation of the 10 captured sailors. That does come up in focus groups. That is a point that people are very relevant. And I think he's also speaking to Obama's early in the Obama administration, first term, he talked about Obama's dithering. Was he dithering on Afghanistan, his indecision as a commander-in-chief? There's still a lot of resentment there among Republicans, certainly independents, and even conservative Democrats, that had to be a sore spot in American history. So I think he had some really interesting things to say.
Jon Allen, what's your takeaway here this afternoon?
I think what Donald Trump is saying is that he wants to lift weights so that he doesn't have to throw punches. He wants the American military to be bigger and stronger, the nuclear arsenal to be rehabilitated, the Navy to be larger, the Army to be larger, and at the same time says he's against globalism and doesn't think that we should be deploying our forces so easily. It's an interesting, I think, reversal, and just like Leslie said, he wants to be very different than Barack Obama, a reversal from the sort of surgical approach that the Obama administration has taken toward going after terrorism. When I say surgical, I mean using special operators. I mean the raid that killed Osama bin Laden and what's going on in Syria right now in terms of the buildup there. This is a very different approach that Donald Trump is articulating.
On the other hand, and you point out something interesting, John, he talks about the need to not engage in some of these democracy-building exercises, as he sort of paraphrased there. But on the other, when he talks about building up the military, it's one of those things, as you guys pointed out, the red meat that gets thrown to supporters. We have the strongest military in the world. We spend more on our military than the next 10 countries combined. So right. What is what is this idea, this obsession that I think a lot of Republicans have with making our military strong again? Whoever said it was weak?
Well, I think there's a lot of evidence to support the idea that America is certainly overextended and that there's some numerous deployments and it's causing both a mental and a physical toll on our men and women in uniform. That's very real. But I think you were exactly right on this idea where he's saying we don't want to make Western democracies and other countries in the Middle East finally understanding. You were talking about things that are thousands of years old, tribal wars, the unrest, and we are responsible, many would argue, for destabilizing that region. And it was, I really felt it was compelling where he connected the dots to say, and it created a vacuum that we now see the resurgence of ISIS. And there's a lot of evidence to support that as well. So whoever wrote this and put this together.
Which Lindsey Graham has been asking. Senator Lindsey Graham has been tweeting. John, I don't know if you've been following Lindsey Graham. The internet loves Lindsey Graham right now. One of his tweets, not sure who is advising Trump on foreign policy, but I can understand why he's not revealing names. He had another one, are we sure the guy running the teleprompter has the pages in the right order? Hashtag not making any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue with what Donald Trump said today, the sort of criticism that I think anybody could have of it is, he basically said, I'm not going to be on this extreme and I'm not going to be on that extreme. But he had very little detail. He spoke for an hour and said almost nothing about how he would actually approach any of the specific issues. And I think that was an issue for him. Of course, I think we're going to hear again and again him mispronouncing the name of the country, Tanzania, called it Tanzania. We will probably hear that a few times when you are already seen as not knowledgeable about a topic and you reinforce it. That ends up being a problem for you politically.
John, though, he continues to kind of drive home to the heart of the American people, and that is, he said today that he wants to once again put America first, to gain respect, and that really does hit home for a lot of Americans who may have felt slighted.
Look, I'm not sure anybody who isn't looking at things through a partisan lens looks at any president in the United States and thinks to themselves, well, that president really wants America to be second or 34th or 58th. So the idea that you're going to have a president who's going to be the first president to come in and say America ought to be first is kind of an odd idea. I think that when the United States enters into the trade agreements that Donald Trump doesn't like, I think the idea is to help the United States, whether or not that's actually the outcome. I do think that there is a lot of popular belief and a lot of public opinion that supports, and we see this on the Republican side with the support for Trump and on the Democratic side with support for Bernie Sanders, that wants to see the United States draw back from the globe a little bit. And I think that's what Donald Trump is speaking to. Now, as a man who's done a lot of international business and has Trump International hotels all over the place, I'm not sure he's going to be able to square that lack of global instinct as a governor, as somebody in government, with what he's done in business.
It's interesting, and some of the other things that he put on the president, talking about the cyber attacks that we have gone through from China. I don't know that that's necessarily the president's fault, although it certainly can be argued that we need to beef up our cyber co-intel, if you will, but I don't know if that's something that can, I mean, every country is attacked. I'm sure other countries have attempted, as have we.
Sure, but is there shared intelligence? Is there an organized effort to defend against this type of thing? It's a global problem that certainly is. The hackers aren't coming from the United States. Let's just put it that way, you know. And we kind of fundamentally see where they're coming from, what's being done. But I think he underscores an important point that American business interests are spending billions on cybersecurity. If you meet with and look at the minutes of, you know, the 10Ks of several Fortune 500 companies, they're talking about cybersecurity because it affects e-commerce and everything that we're doing to grow the U.S. Economic stability anyway. So I think he's right on point. And I've seen a lot of everything from federal contracts that the Pentagon spends trying to look at cybersecurity. It's a national security issue. But I think that Jon is making an interesting case that, you know, he wants his cake, eats it too. There's going to be a lot of people that come out and say there was no substance, there wasn't enough there. Right. Certainly Lindsey Graham, they're kind of like, their feathers are a little ruffled. You know, they're not the ones that are the presumptive nominee. They wanted to be. They have more experience in that case. Sure, we'll give them that. But I think that Donald Trump's speech started out okay and strong, America first, because he's dealing with the fact you have a lot of folks in public opinion research that feel that the U.S. has been humiliated or is not standing as strong as it could be and is overextended. So those were the main message points. He kind of diluted it as he kept going that last half hour. But I think on the merit of that, he had something that can connect with voters.
Jon, I also have a question. It's something that all the candidates running for the GOP nomination have mentioned, the economy clearly, and Mr. Trump here also talking about it. But it's interesting to me, as I went back and looked at some of the things that the GOP candidates for president back in 2012 were saying. For example, Mitt Romney campaigned on saying that he wanted to bring unemployment down to 6% in the United States. Well, right now, last I checked, I haven't looked today, but it's around 4.9%. He wanted cheaper gas. Gas prices have come down in the United States. In other words, some of the things that get tossed around in primary contests, some of the things that get said, some of the things that the people campaign on, President Obama, his administration have actually accomplished some of those things. But, you know, I get where they're coming from, but it seems a little disingenuous.
I don't know if it's disingenuous so much as trying to appeal to an American public that doesn't feel that the economy has recovered to the level that the top lines would suggest. That is to say, it is not appreciably easier for people to get ahead or even to stay where they are, to even stay in place, I think, for a lot of Americans. Not everybody, but for a lot of Americans. And so when they see the economy has recovered largely and they're not feeling it, I think they get upset. I think that explains some of the anger, and I think it's why you see politicians appealing to that. I mean, the price of gas is something that is not controlled by politicians in the United States of America, and not something that, you know, from an overall economic perspective, unless it truly spikes or drops, is really a big factor.